So I think most people are aware of the story where the Kray twins sent Mickey Duff a dead rat, four dead rats actually, because they were under the impression that Mickey Duff had two children when he only had the one son. But the gentleman you see in the thumbnail is a guy called Bobby Ramsey. Now, Bobby Ramsey was born in 1922. Stepney, I think he was from. So he was a bit older than Mickey Duff. Mickey Duff was what, 1929. The twins were 1933. So Bobby Ramsey. Before I tell you what this video is really about, so he was there based. In fact, he went down with Ronnie Kray when he attacked Terence Martin in 1956. It was trial afterwards, 1957, and I think Ronnie got 3 years and Bobby Ramsey got 7 years. Um, the story behind that, actually, I spoke to an old EastEnder not long back, well, maybe a couple of years back, and he's kicking on 90 now. And in actual fact, the guy, Martin, wasn't even the guy who Ronnie Kray wanted. He turned up at the Britannia, which is now, so it's in Shadwell. I think it's some chicken grill, somewhere else now. And it's basically the guy who we wanted wasn't there, so he just started attacking people with a sword. Obviously, Terence Martin was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So Bobby Ramsey was there. So he was like a welterweight from, I think he boxed late 30s, early 40s. Bit of a journeyman. He's one of them. I think somewhere like 130, lost 34. Nothing. As I said in previous videos, the East End was, never mind Great Britain, the East End was full of professional boxers, particularly in the East End and places like Aldgate and that. So Bobby Ramsey was from Stepney, and the twins fell out with him in later life, just before they went to prison, and he ended up attacking Bobby Ramsey. Bobby Ramsey after that, so he died 2004, 84-year-old. So he'd been like a bit part actor, if you like. He'd been in things like The Professionals, Steptoe's Son. Nothing worth, nothing, no major parts. Just fancied himself as a bit of an actor. And obviously, before the twins beat him up, he would kind of do a few bits and bobs. And obviously, I've just finished the Mickey Duff book, and so I think, as I said, it's commonly known what happened with the Krays. And when Ronnie was arrested on May the 8th, 1968, he had a list in his Crombie, "These men must die," and I think there was about 8 names. Mickey Duff was on there. And basically, yeah, so Duff wasn't scared of anyone. He gave off a quote in his 1999 biography where it was something like, I don't think there's anything more lower in society than someone who trades off fear. And he wouldn't be bullied. In his biography, he talks about Rocky Marciano putting his hands on him, Jack Spot, the Whitechapel governor, trying to intimidate him and ended up paying in. And Bobby Ramsey was the same. So when the twins went away, so this incident was probably, I want to say the 70s. It could possibly be in the 80s, but I'm think the 70s. So basically, this that was back in an era when there was no Sky, and basically there was no. Well, these days there's 5 channels. So back in that day, there was 3 channels. So yes, Mickey Duff had the BBC, but there wasn't a great deal of boxing on. So Mickey's son, Gary Prager, was an absolute lovely gentleman. You can tell he's really been brought up well. Speaks, he's very puts himself across well. And obviously, Mickey had a very different upbringing to, I dare say, I think maybe Gary even went to a private school. But of course, Mickey was brought up in the media will tell you Aldgate, but it wasn't. It was Spitalfields. It was it was where Jack the Ripper killed his second victim, Hanbury Street, and he went to school in Hackney. So he had a different upbringing. You know, he obviously used boxing as a vehicle to better his life, albeit outside of the ring. But he boxed as well. And basically, so this night, Gary Prager, as I said, I think it was probably the 70s, but maybe the 80s, used to go around a lot of the pubs in London and put these boxing nights on, if you like, these old kind of, um, that was the only way really a lot of the society back in that day was going to see the likes of your Rocky Marciano and Ezra Charles, Joe Lewis, all the old greats, if you like. So Gary, in obviously the Prager wisdom, he obviously Mickey Duff had a fabulous library of old fights. So basically Gary was going around, and this particular pub, it was a pub in South London. Um, you know, Mad Frankie Fraser. I want to say it was maybe possibly Mad Frankie Fraser's pub, and basically Bobby Ramsey saw Gary Prager, obviously Mickey Duff's son, and tried to put the heavies on him. Obviously Gary was. Mickey was certainly from thick, but Gary was a lot more diplomatic than his father, shall we say. Obviously, Mickey grew up from the East End, and where Gary wasn't brought up around your violence or obviously, but brought up around boxing. But to be brought up where Mickey Duff was in his 30s and the 40s, it was extreme acts of violence was the norm. It was how people negotiated, shall we say. So Gary has put this show on over South London, and Mad Frankie Fraser's seen him and said something like, "You're Mickey Duff's son. I effing hate your father." I actually found a quote from Mad Frankie Fraser's website in '99, which says something like, "Mickey Duff was a bigot who says anything basically to try and shot dead at Reggie Kray's parole." So that obviously Mad Frankie Fraser didn't like him. So Gary was like, "Hang on a minute, that's my dad. That's not me. I'm a different person. Whatever you've got." Gary's very well spoken, and I dare say probably highly educated, and as I said, diplomatic. So he can, he's hell of a talker. I actually said to my wife, Gary's actually probably got the most kind of English accent that you could possibly hear. He would be great for a documentary or being a narrator or something. And anyway, words were exchanged, and kind of Gary Prager has kind of stood up to Frankie Fraser, and said, "Look, that's my dad, but that's not me. I haven't done anything." Conversation ended up with something like Mad Frankie Fraser saying to him, "You're all right, you young Duff." Um, and it was that evening where Bobby Ramsey, as I said, maybe early member of the firm, saw Gary Prager and threatened to put a bayonet up his backside. I think that was the words. Again, Gary kind of used his brain and kind of, certainly wasn't bullied, but, talked his way out of, um, basically stood up for himself. But anyway, certainly didn't get a bayonet up his backside. And a couple of weeks later, I think it was a boxing show at the Royal Albert Hall. And Bobby Ramsey was there, and he went up to Mickey Duff and said, "Are you all right?" And instantly, Mickey Duff went up to him and said, "Is that right? You're going to put a bayonet up my son's backside?" He said, "If that is the case, if he gets a bayonet up his backside, I will make sure you get a noose around your neck." Bobby Ramsey just laughed it off. But from that day forward, Bobby Ramsey never ever entered a Mickey Duff boxing show again, which is really, it was the only show in town. Obviously, he had the links to the Royal Albert Hall and obviously the Wembley Arena. So, it was when Steve Bunce was bad for a couple of years. I think Steve Bunce actually put in the Boxing News last year. Mickey Duff was a brilliant boxing man, and he had connections everywhere. And he said, he would turn up at these shows and he would look for me. And I would imagine that's probably what Mickey Duff did to the likes of your Bobby Ramsey's. And I did interview a guy who was there actually, who witnessed an altercation with Mickey Duff and Freddie Foreman. And again, he stood his ground. So Mickey Duff didn't suffer fools gladly, and wouldn't be, he wouldn't be bullied or threatened by the likes of that. Who, they're certainly not Joe Publics. They're basically people who've just, um, as Mickey Duff said, that there's no lower form in society than people who want to trade off fear. Um, yeah, you see them on YouTube, bullies and gangsters and all this kind of stuff. And I grew up, it's all very much it gives off a wrong narrative that there's no women, there's no children, untouchable nonsense. I think most people over the years you kind of saw the campaign of harassment I've had to endure, and my wife and child were targeted, and I think that's what it was back in those days. But it kind of gets glossed over because Tom Hardy played the Krays and the Kems played the Krays, and it's okay because it does make me laugh. I've done some books on some not very nice characters, if you like, but I've never did any. I've did your Roy Shaws, I've did Lee Duffy's, your Paul Sykes, your Dominic Negas's, but I never did any murderers. And a lot of people have a go at me and say, "Oh, you can't do this book, you can't do this and that." But Ronnie Kray walked into a pub and shot someone, and as I said, I'm in the East End quite a lot, and I never, I understand it because it's social history, but I don't understand how people can celebrate where a man was shot dead in a pub, and but as I said, it's I'm very well of the nature of the beast, and it's true crime, and I'm done with that now. I released my last book a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, I know what the true crime books sell compared to your footballers and the boxers, and yeah, very sad really, but that's just the nature of the beast, and I think that's why if you go in any Waterstones and ask what the most true, what the most successful genre is in book sales, I can assure you that it's probably, well, it's certainly true crime. But yeah, and that was just a case of one of many incidents of Mickey Duff. And although the Kray twins were sent to prison for life in 1969, a lot of the members of the firm were out and did try and put heavies on over the years. I've spoken to various people over the years, um, and heard kind of stories like that. But that was one that I know personally happened. So as I said, he stood up to Bobby Ramsey, and Bobby Ramsey never ever stepped foot in a Mickey Duff boxing show ever again, certainly in London. Let us know your thoughts.